3rd of October 1961, 2:15 a.m., 3rd floor bullpen, 28th Precinct, Harlem. Bumpy Johnson stood cuffed to a steam pipe, lips split. 6 uniformed cops circling him, paperwork already stamped for a 20-year parole violation. Captain Walter Red Kincaid leaned on the desk, freckled knuckles around a nightstick, and smirked. "Your little girl will learn respect the hard way." Everyone expected Bumpy to leave that room straight to Sing Sing by sunrise. But what Kincaid didn't know, Bumpy Johnson had been mapping every inch of this precinct for 11 nights. 41 hours later, the captain's gold shield lay half-buried in a pile of rotten coffee grounds on Lenox Avenue, and Bumpy was eating grits at Wilson's Diner, free as Sunday. Kincaid stared at the empty space on his chest, breath hitching, future evaporating. This is the story of how a father turned a precinct inside out. Listen close, friends. How did he do it? The 28th Precinct sat on 123rd Street and Frederick Douglass Boulevard, a gray limestone cube built in 1894. Inside, 22 cells, 1 evidence vault, and a labyrinth of unmarked hallways formed what locals called the stomach. Once you went in, you got digested. For 30 years, it processed more Harlem men than any courthouse. Captain Walter Red Kincaid ruled that cube. 5 commendations, 2 shootings ruled justified, and a reputation for turning black suspects into statistics before sunrise. Since 1956, his squad logged 412 arrests and 8 unexplained hospitalizations. On the streets, Bumpy Johnson held court at Wells Restaurant, but inside that station he was just inmate number 31487. Every guard carried the captain's grin, and parole officers signed whatever lines Kincaid highlighted. A single stroke of his pen could add 10 years to a man's paperwork. October 1961 mattered because the Freedom Riders were burning up headlines and the Justice Department pretended to watch. Harlem civilians were counting who would finally check the precinct's power. Kincaid's record 0 disciplinary hearings, 6 internal affairs complaints vanished. City Hall donations totaling $9,800 made him look untouchable. Nobody believed one prisoner could bend that system. That belief, like Kincaid's badge, would soon land in garbage. The 12th of June 1961, 5:45 p.m. 4 months earlier. Ruthie Johnson, 19, second-year student at Hunter College, crossed 125th Street, carrying 2 art portfolios. Sergeant Kincaid spotted her from his patrol car and ordered, "Stop right there, girl." She kept walking. He hit the siren, leapt out, and twisted her wrists into nickel cuffs, accusing her of obstructing pedestrian flow. 30 pedestrians watched, including Reverend Otis Bell. Bumpy arrived 3 minutes later, breath hot, suit jacket still on a restaurant hanger. Kincaid said, "Rules apply to colored girls too." Bumpy answered softly, "Let my daughter go before you make a bookkeeping error you can't erase." Kincaid tightened the cuffs until Ruthie winced. That humiliation ignited the feud. June 14, plainclothes cops raided Bumpy's number spot on 138th, seized $4,200, and smashed adding machines. June 22, health inspectors escorted by Kincaid padlocked Wells Restaurant for rodent risk, costing Bumpy $1,900 in spoiled food. July 3 at 11:20 p.m., 2 rookies dragged Bumpy's driver Milton Skins, Carter from a Buick, and broke his collarbone with batons. Bumpy's ledger showed losses piling: $6,100 cash, 1 employee hospitalized, 36 hours of operations frozen. Yet he only watched. He sat on Lenox stoop nights with a pocket notebook, logging license plates, shift rotations, and cigar brands. Pee Wee Thornton teased, "Boss, you turning into an accountant?" Bumpy answered, "Every empire falls to paperwork." The small detail he caught arrived July 17, 8:12 a.m., when he noticed Kincaid parked in a hydrant zone, running into Aunt Sally's bakery for a powdered cruller. The meter maid, Mrs. Eloise Grant, kept walking. Bumpy wrote, "Kay pays off ticket desk $15 per week." No one else cared. August 28. Internal Affairs dismissed Ruthie's excessive force complaint for lack of evidence. Kincaid swaggered out of the hearing room and clapped a reporter's shoulder. Johnson blinked. Outside, Bumpy looked downcast, tie loose, hands folded. The captain smelled victory. That evening, under the glow of a broken street lamp, Bumpy opened a fresh ledger, numbered the pages, and wrote the date in red ink. The trap was officially in motion. Nobody noticed the quiet math he was running on them every night. The 30th of September 1961, 10:10 p.m. Bumpy walked straight into the 28th Precinct front desk, carrying a brown envelope bulging with cash and number slips. He waved it under the booking camera and said, "Violation of parole terms, gentlemen, lock me up." Desk Sergeant Lou Marino nearly choked. Nobody surrenders with evidence in hand. Marino phoned Kincaid at Delaney's Tavern. The captain arrived 11 minutes later, breath smelling of rye, eyes shining. "I knew you'd beg eventually," he sneered, snapping cuffs on Bumpy himself. He charged him with extortion, bribery, and tampering counts that could stack 30 years. Outside, press photographer Leila Ortiz captured the image at 10:33 p.m., Bumpy smiling like he'd won a raffle. At 1:20 a.m., 4 guards, Ferguson, Kelly, Soto, and Mahoney shackled Bumpy's ankles and loaded him into a paddy wagon for Rikers Island intake. Rain hammered the roof. Inside the dark box, he hummed A-Train and loosened one floor bolt with a nickel he'd palmed before surrendering. That nickel had come from Ruthie's cuff keychain. Processing at Rikers usually erased a man's name, but Bumpy had already mailed 3 letters. The first to attorney Eunice Pierce contained notarized statements from 6 street vendors describing Kincaid's hydrant parking hustle. The second to Daily News columnist Sid Garfield listed 19 dates, 14 license plates, and $840 in parking bribes. The third to FBI agent Harold Jacobs referenced a sealed ledger numbered in red ink. Inside solitary, Bumpy signaled ally inmate Leon Professor Maddox by tapping Morse on the pipe. Plan C. Maddox passed folded carbon copies through the laundry chute to Courier Earl Shorty Price in the kitchen. Price hid them in a bag of government beans and rode the supply truck back across the bridge at 5:45 a.m. Meanwhile, Kincaid strutted through Harlem, boasting. Johnson finally swallowed the hook. He scheduled a press conference for October 2, 9 a.m. to announce the arrest. Reporters quoted him comparing Bumpy to a busted shoe shine box. The captain never thought to check the evidence vault. By sunrise, 3 tiny victories clicked. Agent Jacobs opened a federal civil rights inquiry. Pierce filed a habeas corpus motion citing excessive force during surrender. And Garfield's column, Hydrant Hustle, hit page 3 with Kincaid's photo. The precinct phones rang off their holders. The trap was closed. Only the prey kept celebrating. Inside his cell, Bumpy rolled that freed bolt between his fingers and whispered, 20 left to fall before dawn comes. Bumpy had rehearsed the entire sequence since the night Ruthie was cuffed. For 79 days he logged, copied, and duplicated every impropriety Kincaid committed, building a paper bomb the captain couldn't see. The nickel bolt was just flourish. Domino 1 fell at 8:05 a.m. October 2. City Comptroller's clerk Diane Mullins, responding to Garfield's column, pulled parking ticket ledgers and found 213 voided citations tied to Kincaid's patrol car. She faxed copies to the Manhattan District Attorney. Domino 2, 8:27 a.m. FBI agent Jacobs hand-delivered a civil rights subpoena to the precinct, demanding custody of all evidence against Bumpy within 4 hours. Domino 3 hit at 8:40 a.m. inside the evidence vault. Officer Mahoney, new on night detail, opened the brown envelope expecting cash. Instead, he found 32 photocopied parking tickets stapled to a sworn statement by Reverend Bell describing Ruthie's arrest. Note, read, Chain of custody begins with you. Mahoney's pulse spiked to 118. The clerk recorded it. Domino 4 sounded at 9:02 a.m. when attorney Eunice Pierce strode into Judge Horowitz's chambers, waving a stamped writ. Produce Walter Kincaid for testimony today, 2 p.m. The judge, seeing the federal subpoena, signed without hesitation. Court officer stamped docket 61 to 3,287. Kincaid first sensed smoke at 9:15 a.m. when Inspector Moreno called. "Why is the bureau inside your vault?" The captain's freckles drained white. He canceled the press conference, but photographers were in the hallway, snapping his stumble. Meanwhile, inside Rikers, Bumpy sat across steel table from Counselor Jacobs' special visit approved by Warden Lucas, who owed Jacobs a favor from a 1,959 gambling probe. Jacobs slid over a manila folder, affidavits from 6 vendors, 3 patrolmen, and the meter maid. "Your math checks," he said. Bumpy replied. "Equal signs don't lie." At 11:22 a.m., the district attorney's office faxed arrest approval for official misconduct, grand larceny, and falsifying records charges carrying up to 25 years. Moreno ordered Internal Affairs to seize Kincaid's weapon and shield immediately. The corridor lights seemed suddenly brighter. Sweat darkened the captain's collar. Back in Harlem, Pee Wee Thornton and Shorty Price executed the optics phase. They paid sanitation worker Gus McNeil $50 to place Kincaid's badge atop the trash pile outside the precinct. Photographer Lila Ortiz captured frame 37, shiny shield amid coffee filters at 1:07 p.m. The image hit AP wire within 30 minutes. 2 p.m. sharp, courtroom 4B. Kincaid tried invoking the Fifth. Judge Horowitz reminded him the subpoena concerned administrative, not criminal, questions. Refusal meant contempt. His voice cracked. I need counsel." Reporters scribbled. Bumpy, released on his own recognizance at 2:45 p.m., walked past the captain in the courthouse rotunda. "You said rules apply to colored girls," he murmured. "Turns out they apply to red-haired captains too." Kincaid's hands shook so hard the cuffs rattled. Kincaid spent the night of the 3rd of October 1961 inside the same third-floor bullpen he once lorded over, this time in a wrinkled white shirt with the buttons confiscated. Internal Affairs booked him on 6 counts, set bail at $75,000, and suspended him without pay pending indictment. 24 hours earlier, he'd planned a victory speech. Now he asked Mahoney for a cigarette. 4 days later, the Manhattan grand jury returned a 17-page indictment. Headlines read, "Racist cop charged in ticket scam." 11 patrolmen were reassigned, 3 civilians hired as clerks, and the city comptroller ordered an audit of every voided citation since 1955, 21,308 tickets worth an estimated $318,720 in lost revenue. Mayor Wagner called it the ugliest embarrassment of my administration. Inside Rikers' mess hall, officers no longer touched Bumpy's tray. Warden Lucas authorized open visiting hours on Sundays, a privilege given to only 6 inmates. On the street, numbers runners quoted the story whenever beat cops pressed for collecting fees. Even rival gambler Joe Spanish Vega told his men, "Use Johnson's paperwork play if blue boys push you." Kincaid's spiral accelerated. His wife filed for divorce on November 12, citing public disgrace. Bail bondsman refused his calls after Agent Jacobs hinted at federal charges. By December, unpaid legal bills hit $9,400. On the 6th of January 1962, he pled guilty to 2 counts, drew a 2 to 6 year sentence, and walked into Sing Sing under guard Kelly's watch. Bumpy's status, meanwhile, turned near mythic. Judges respected his filigreed ledgers. Precinct captains thought twice before jamming a Johnson operation. Ruthie finished her semester without harassment, graduating 3 years later with honors in fine arts. Harlem whispered that a pen and a nickel had done what fists never could. Even Governor Rockefeller's aide requested a summary, curious how a convict audited the police and shook his head. What this saga proved is simple. Power built on fear crumbles when confronted by meticulous truth. Bumpy didn't throw a single punch. He threw documents, timestamps, and signatures, things a baton can't beat. Strategy outweighed violence because numbers live longer than bruises. Kincaid's fists bruised Ruthie for a week. Bumpy's ledger bruised the precinct for decades, shaping audits, promotions, and press policy. One sharpened mind redirected an entire institution without firing a shot. That precision sealed Bumpy's wider legend. Street hustlers respected his muscle, but after October 1961, they revered his mathematics. He was the man who could weaponize a parking ticket. The lesson travels beyond Harlem. In boardrooms, startups, or neighborhood councils, the side that counts details usually bends the room. As Bumpy later told Shorty Price over chess, "A king moves one square at a time, but each square is plotted." Remember that next time someone corners you, right, record, log, and let the facts march. Today, body cams and smartphones continue the tactic. Receipts still humble bullies. The badge in the trash became a photograph every reformer cites. Quiet intelligence, applied patiently, remains undefeated. Ask any rookie journalist why they archive emails, they'll mention Bumpy before Ben Franklin every single time. The 3rd of October 1961. 2:15 a.m. 6 cops cornered Bumpy. 41 hours later their captain wore chains. If this cold-blooded victory proves brains beat brutality, subscribe. Like if you trust ink over iron. Comment. Ledger or bat, what's your play? Remember, patience counts.